Estrada, and this is Street Pulse.
Good evening, Dr. Mud.
In a few weeks, the CONCOM up its funds and its work people.
And the question now already is this proposed draft of the Constitution, which some say falls below expectation.
Is it really? Well, before we answer the scores of questions that have arisen after the CONCOM's 3 hectic months, let's take a look at its background feature.
Nagluluksa na naman ang sabayanang Pilipino. Nadurog na muli ang pangarap nating nabuhay nitong nakaraang revolusyon. At ang sabi ko, mabuhay ang mga multinationals. Binabati ko ang mga tagapagtanggol nito. Big Brother is happy.
Last August, 5 members of what is known as the Nationalist Bloc of the Constitutional Commission sent shockwaves to the public when they walked out of the halls. They protested against what they called the charter body's drift towards conservatism. 5 eventually returned, but as Sobroca from the arts sector never reconsidered after losing, he claims, major battles. Recently, the 5 women members of the CONCOM also threatened to walk out if there would have been as much as an attempt by their fellow drafters to water down protective provisions for women. Tension pervades in CONCOM. Sessions have been marred by heated debates, 4-letter words, ashtray throwing, and near fistfights. These were bound to happen, for in the CONCOM lie not only divergent but opposing schools of thought. What the situation worse is that the different views must meet on a common ground with one constitution for 54 million people in 3 short months. Hader fled. In its wake came a dilemma. Will the new government, swept into place by a revolution, be revolutionary? With the ascendance of new power, the dismantling legislative structures, the entry of new ministry and local government officials, the further flight of capital, and continuing erosion of the economy, the population was thrown into a state of immobility. Yes, the oppressive regime was gone, but what next? In the people's newfound pride and hope, there were residues of fear.
Really will have a serious constitutional crisis because the convening of the Batasan with a speaker belonging to the Aquino coalition will bring about a collision course between the executive and the legislative branches of government. President Aquino will be compelled to attack the military, close the Batasan, arrest the rebels.
Proclamation number 3, the Freedom Constitution, was issued by President Aquino when she abolished the Batasan. Essentially, it was to assure sympathizers and critics alike that there would be principles and structures to abide by in her governance. This was the president's tool of transition towards normalcy and stability. In other words, she was buying time. The government immediately called for the formation of charter makers, but instead of being elected as in 1935 and in 1972, the Constitution framers were appointed by the Lady President. This drew a lot of protests. Questions were raised on the independence and integrity of the CONCOM. Progressives assailed what they called the elitist composition of the body. Wala ring mangyayari, they said. On the other extreme, there was general indifference, not ignorance of the CONCOM and of the ramification. In its initial sessions, the CONCOM filled the galleries only with echoes, which were now and then broken by snores of waiting chauffeurs and yayas. The CONCOM was aware of its elitist image and tried to shake it off when it conducted public hearings where commissioners fanned out to the countrysides to get the views and sentiments of the common tao. But when it came to synthesizing the people's recommendations, the conflict of ideas came to surface more prominently. The almost arduous process of rewording the preamble in the first days of the CONCOM should have provided the clue. For as the days went by, particularly on the issues legislature, agrarian reform, multinationals, regional autonomy, U.S. bases, and Filipinization of schools, CONCOM sessions became major events. The citizenry became more aware and deeply involved, sides shouting louder. Today, the CONCOM sessions are at their end, but the different schools of thought remain ever more strongly opposed to each other. But ultimately, it is the people who shall make the choice. But the question is, will they accept the proposed basic laws of the land? Will they take it or leave it? In the completion of the proposed Constitution, there came another dilemma. How will they accept the Constitution, as a whole or in parts? There are proponents who believe that the people must be able to reject those sections of the proposed Constitution that they object to. Can they do this? Will they do this? Understandably, there will be CONCOM members who shall campaign ratification, and there will be those who encourage its repudiation, even in parts. The Cabinet, the CONCOM, divided. Must the people's choice be so?
The controversial issue nowadays of the process of ratification of the proposed charter, and we have our guest for to shed light on that issue. Butch?
Yeah, joining us tonight, a set of distinguished guests, led by Father Joaquin Bernas of the Constitutional Commission, and to my left, Commissioner Jose Bengson, also of the Constitutional Commission, and to the extreme left is Commissioner Leopoldo Africa of the Commission on Elections. But before we go on any further, let's take a break.
We went to the CONCOM to interview some commissioners on their views on the proposed process of ratification. Let's take a look now.
Pero palagay ko mas malaki ang bentaha nang iharap natin sa bayan ito. Sapagkat ito ay parang struktura ito balangkas ng isang gusali o isang bayan na kailangan sapagkat kung aring maaprubahan kumbaga sa planong bubungan sa lang bintana. And while there are some provisions that they say do not belong exactly structure, well, they are related. They are interrelated. And furthermore, provisions, if some are not approved, well, it happened, for example, provisions are approved.
So, gulo lang
lalo magkakagulo at saka meron mga provision dyan kung sino yung gagawa ng mga provision yun. Magkakaroon ba ng CONCOM na? Bukod doon, pag pinaghiwa-hiwalay mo yan, baka doon malito ang ating mga lalo na sa mga baryo. Doon sa mga baryo.
But aren't we underestimating the people na hindi sila handa sa ganyang klaseng ratification?
Hindi ko naman sabing ganon, pero hindi lang sa taong bayan kundi ang panahon. Sigurong mga itnasang buwan lang o pinakamahaba na 2 buwan na ito ipaliliwanag yan. Kailangan nyo isalin pa sa iba't ibang wika. Pagkat paliliwanag mo sa bayan na piecemeal, at yan hindi paliliwanag lamang, kundi pagdedebatan, masyadong magugulo ating taong bayan.
But at the same time, I think it is also important to our people a chance to be able to check to certain articles very strongly. And if they do, if there is a significant number of the population who object to a certain article or sections within an article, I think that should be taken into account, so that after a certain period, either the Congress, declaring itself a constituent assembly, can then begin to revise those parts.
You mean make amendments to the Constitution?
For example, the provision on the basis. If people really make a strong pronouncement that they are against the basis, this should be reconsidered.
But this create more confusion and waste more time and effort part of the CONCOM. Is it really feasible?
Well, first of all, as I already mentioned, we can have a global vote on a yes or a no. But having said, for those who have said yes, I think they should be given a chance to have selective objection to certain articles or sections which they find very highly objectionable. And I think in so doing, you can then count, if there is a significant majority of the people who are against a certain article, then that could be properly revised, or against a specific section in an article.
And naturally, this will generate more discussions and questions, and will make the people more aware of the issues.
I believe, in fact, that this process will enable the people to intelligently grapple with very sensitive issues and find out what are those specific issues that they are against. Like the basis has been a very sensitive question. Allow the people to pronounce on some such provision.
Well, we've just heard two different views on 2 different processes of ratification. And I guess some controversial issues in the proposed charter has brought up this idea of splitting the proposed charter into separate parts and for the people voting separately on them. And I guess Father Bernas could explain to us how and why this idea came about.
Well, it's really not just the fact that there are controversial issues there. It's also the fact that it's a recognition of the fact that our people are an intelligent citizenry, politically conscious people, and they would like to be able to pass judgment more thoroughly on what we are offering them. So I think we should give them the opportunity. Added to this is the peculiar character of the Constitutional Commission. It is not an elected body, it is an appointed body. We made an effort to make consultations prior to our deliberations, but really that is not enough. So there was a certain dissatisfaction among the people, but because of the fact that, and it keeps coming up, because of the fact that we are not an elected body, but an appointed body. So really, in controversial moments, then I personally ask myself, who is my constituency? Who put me in here? Who am I representing? Since I'm quite conscious of the fact that I'm not conscious of representing anybody, then I'd like to be able to give to the people the opportunity to pass judgment on those which could divide very easily.
Yeah. Commissioner Bengson, what do you think? Why do you think these proposals suddenly came up in the floor of the discussions in the commission?
Actually, this was started. This suggestion was started by Father Bernas after the issue and the basis was voted upon, and he came up with the suggestion. And that was the first time I heard
Maybe
about it officially.
Yes, maybe Father Bernas could explain to us the mechanics of his proposal.
Well, let me explain it this way. Because you look at the Constitution, what does it consist of? Traditionally, a Constitution consists of three parts. Commentators on Constitution talk about the first part being the Constitution of Government, another part a Constitution of Liberty, and Constitution of Sovereignty. The Constitution of Government is that part of a Constitution where you set up the governmental structure. That is a whole by itself. And the second part are those portions which guarantee the rights of the citizens against the powers of government. That traditionally is the Bill of Rights. And then the third essential part is what is called the Constitution of Sovereignty. That part of the Constitution which provides the instrumentality whereby the people are able to express themselves in matters that affect fundamental issues. And that is the amendatory process and the electoral process. So these three parts, these are at the heart of a constitutional process. But in the course of the development of constitutionalism, there have been added into constitutions matters which are perhaps not strictly constitutional, but are policy matters, more general thing, but policy. Now, for instance, you have an entire article on social justice now. You have an entire article on the national economy. These are policy matters. That's true, they give soul to the Constitution. But if you listen to the clip of Commissioner Rodrigo, he was talking about the parts of the house, the bubong and the window and the floor, the pillars and everything. Well, if you're talking about that, we're talking about the structure of government, the legislative department, the executive department, the judicial department, the constitutional commissions, the monetary board, and the Commission on Human Rights. These are the essential structures.
Father, you're saying now that if you have those three as a core, then that would, and they get approved, that would be enough to constitutionalize.
Yes, what I would propose if we were to do this is we should have at least a core which is complete by itself. So that let us say that the people were to reject, let's say, the Commission on the Article on Social Justice. What happens after that? Then we don't have an article on social justice. But then if you have approved this core, which has the provision prescribing how the Constitution is to be amended, how the Constitution is to be revised, then that part of the Constitution can operate and work towards the formulation of something in substitution of what we have rejected.
Would this process of ratification, Commissioner Bengson, give the proposed charter a greater chance of being ratified by the people? Or would it be more accepted by the people if it were ratified the traditional manner?
Well, to begin with, I really don't agree with the proposal of Father Bernas, because I feel that even if you do have a core, yet the other parts of the Constitution such as the social justice, national economy, and the others, are an integrated part of the whole, and they are intertwined and interrelated with the core, so to speak. So I would go for the traditional way of having it ratified on a take it or leave it basis. And I guess it would be simpler for us to explain it to the people, to do it the traditional way.
But if there are provisions which are, according to some people, not pro-people and not very nationalist in nature, and that have been watered down, if these controversial provisions would, or issues would cause the non-ratification of the proposed charter, then it's a pity that only because of these few provisions.
Lauren, you have to take it, you have to look at it as a whole. Undoubtedly, even I guess, even in those sections or those articles which compose the core of the Constitution, as Father Bernas would say, there are certain sections there in every article that may not be so acceptable. So we have to look at the Constitution as a whole. Even if we do disagree with some of the sections there, if on the whole, this is what we feel is the expression of the people's will, the goals that we aspire for, then let's vote for it and ratify it.
Perhaps, Lauren, we can ask our man from COMELEC
Definitely, yeah.
whether this process of ratification has ever been done here in the country or in other countries. I mean, is it something very new?
Domestically, I am referring to the Philippines. We do not recall of any instance where a constitution was submitted to the people in parts, because actually we had only one constitution, and that's the 1935 Constitution that was actually submitted for ratification to the people. The so-called 1973 document was not actually submitted for ratification to the people. So,
no precedent yet.
in the Philippines,
In the
none.
Philippines, in other
I am not aware. I don't pretend to that there is such a precedent in other countries.
Well, actually there is. That's true. Domestically, you have never tried it, but in Virginia in 1970 they tried it. They had a major core, and then they had, aside from the major core, they had 3 other controversial parts. All of them passed. All of them passed. But I'd like to make a comment on the idea that we must look at the Constitution as a whole. And I agree 100% that we must look at the Constitution as a whole. And as far as the Constitutional Commission is concerned, when the Constitutional Commission finishes its work, it has made its judgment. This composes a whole. But when we present it to the people, we are asking them to approve it, not just in parts, but we're also asking them, do you agree that this particular part forms part of the whole?
Father, I understand that there is a compromise. There is a traditional manner of ratifying, and there is your proposal, and there's been a compromise between the two. Could you explain that?
Well, that was what Ed Garcia was talking about in the clip we had, where he was talking about selective objection. You present the Constitution to them as a whole, but then you make provisions for objections to the various parts they might object. Now, I think it's workable, but I guess the mechanics of doing that may be a little difficult. The commissioner from the COMELEC could probably... How would you, for instance, formulate a ballot for a system like that? Where, and then, aside from that, we have already in the provisions on amendment to the Constitution a system which does something like that. Traditionally, amendments to the Constitution would come only from Congress or from a constitutional convention. But now we have a provision in the new draft which says that amendments to the Constitution can come directly from the people through initiative and referendum. So this would have the same effect as the selective objection. If later on they feel that some of the parts we present to them are objectionable, then through the process of initiative and referendum, zeroing in on individual issues, you can go towards eliminating what the people might consider to be the objectionable parts.
Lauren, can I comment on
Yes.
what Father Bernas said? Seems to me, I think we have made some checks on this Constitution in Virginia. It's true that there were some proposals that were presented in parts, but these proposals were just amendments. I would agree that you could present proposals in parts when you come to just amendments of a constitution.
It was a total.
Not the whole Constitution.
It was a
But
total. It
on
was
the
a
whole
total revision. It was a total revision of the Virginia Constitution.
Well, we
it was a
shall,
long process. The Virginia Law Journal had a long article on that, detailing the whole process of formulating this all through. They went through a process more complicated than the Constitutional Commission we had.
We shall scrutinize that issue closer after we take a short break. Street Pulse will be back. Should the proposed constitution be ratified on a piecemeal basis or on a take-it-or-leave-it method? We shall be answering your questions after we listen to some interviews.
We also interviewed Commissioners Gascon, Rama, and Suarez in the commission, and let's hear what they have to say about this issue.
People are not ready for just such kind of a method. In the 1935 Constitution and the 1973 Constitution as well, it was presented in one package. And that's how our people are conditioned in the matter of ratification, especially because of that doctrine that was enunciated by our Supreme Court in that case that I mentioned, the Tolentino case, no? And that means pwede yung package, several packages for ratification.
Well, definitely it's not traditional in the sense that we've never tried it before in our history of ratification of constitutions. But again, the Constitutional Commission itself was a new way of writing a constitution. No? There is a precedent, I believe, told by some of the commissioners that this has been done in the ratification of the Constitution of the State of Virginia. And I think personally that this would be good because we would have a more incisive discussion of the provisions, not only in the major part but also on the controversial parts. No?
It is my considered view that almost 100% of all the provisions that we have in the Constitution are good provisions. These are reflected by the profile of the people who are in the commission, and this commission is superior to the Constitutional Convention that we have in 1973. So I believe that the whole Constitution can be presented to the people, and the people cannot do wrong by voting it as a whole. I have a confident prediction that it will be ratified by the people. There are many reasons. One, it's a good Constitution. Second, people are suffering from a trauma of the present Constitution. We have Marcos Constitution, which we are abolishing and changing, as a matter of fact, with this Constitution. In other words, we have a comparison. You have to compare the Constitution that we are coming up and Mr. Marcos' rotten Constitution, which was a dictatorship.
Commissioner Africa, what do you think of the comments from our commissioners? And is the COMELEC ready for the plebiscite, for the coming plebiscite?
Frankly, no, because we are not even informed right now what kind of a constitution we are presenting for ratification. So, but I heard Father Bernas saying that there is a provision there for a new method of amending the Constitution. So what is wrong about presenting the Constitution now as a whole package and amending provisions which they consider later to be objectionable?
Well, first of all, I would say, I would agree with Naprama, what he was saying in the film clip, that this is a much better constitution. We'll be coming out with a much better constitution in 1973. I might even say that I'm sure it will be accepted. Whether you present it as a whole or in part, the whole thing will be accepted. But precisely because of the fact that there are some controversial parts in there, if in spite of splitting them into parts, you get acceptance, it becomes a stronger constitution. Now, the other point is, I place a very high premium on the educational value of presenting it this way, because you're able to focus discussion on controversial matters. We must remember that even within the Constitutional Commission ourselves, the votes were rather divided. Now, I just asked one of my assistants this afternoon to make a tabulation of how the commissioners voted on the various articles. There are some parts that are practically unanimous, nobody against. But there are some, take for instance the one on the national economy and the patrimony of the nation. 26 voted in favor, 9 voted against, 3 abstained for a total of 38. So this is perhaps the most split thing. I myself believe that this provision, even as it stands, even if you separate it, will be accepted. But then if you present it precisely separately and let the people pass judgment on it as it stands, then we can be more sure that this has been accepted by the people, not just via a hold-up, your money or life, but they really accepted it.
But what happens to these provisions if they are rejected by the people?
Well, as a matter of fact,
Part of it, yeah.
as a matter of fact, that's one of the things you'll have to tell the people. Look, if you reject this, you go back to the 1973 Constitution. Its counterpart, the 1973 Constitution. So that...
Giving them any choice.
Well, that's why when you present it to these people, you will be explaining not just the substantive merits of the provisions you have approved, but you also the comparative merits in comparison with the provision which would be in effect if you didn't accept them.
Father, why do you say 1973? We have this Freedom Constitution.
Well, the Freedom Constitution basically adopts many of the provisions of 1973. I have the Freedom Constitution here. It says that it adopts Article 1, Article 3, Article 4, Article 5, and Article 6 of the 1973 Constitution in total. Then it adopts the other sections to the extent that they do not conflict with this Freedom Constitution. So when I say 1973 Constitution, I would mean the parts of the 1973 Constitution which have been accepted by the Freedom Constitution.
Commissioner Bengson, what do you have to say about what Father just explained now?
Well, a father believes that even if we present this Constitution in parts and they will be accepted, I think that we present the Constitution as a whole, explain the parts of this Constitution to the people part by part, and let them vote on it as a whole, taking into consideration the pluses and the minuses of the whole Constitution. I think that the people, Father Bernas says that he feels that it would be a stronger Constitution if, in addition to voting it as a whole, they will also vote it in parts. I feel that it would be a stronger Constitution if, despite certain objections they may have over certain parts, if on the whole they say it's a good Constitution, I think it's stronger that way.
But don't you think this will encourage discussion and intellectual stimulation among the Filipino people as a whole?
Whether you present it in parts or you present it as a whole, you encourage discussion. Because if you present it as a whole, you must explain to them the various parts.
How would the difference in the process of ratification affect the COMELEC?
Well, I don't think we'll have much difficulty as long as the CONCOM frames question is just a mechanical act of drafting this question and printing them in the proper ballot.
How ready is the COMELEC for the plebiscite? You said earlier that you are not yet ready, but what safeguards have you lined up so that this plebiscite will be free of anomalies, irregularities with which the previous plebiscites and elections have been so noted for?
To begin with, Lauren, we have not been officially informed when the plebiscite is going to be held. But notwithstanding that, we have made initial preparations like bidding for materials to be used in the plebiscite. But we have not gone into detail on, let's say, the job of translating the Constitution into 11 major dialects, because we don't even know what to translate. We have not received an official copy of the final draft, because we are required to print as many copies of the Constitution as there are major dialects and voters. And we estimated this to round up to about 30 million pamphlets, the primer. We are also required to print at least one copy for each household in English and Filipino. And by the latest count, there are estimated to be about 10,187,000 households. So you can imagine the magnitude of the job involved in having to print 30 million primers and about more than 20 million copies of the Constitution in English and Filipino.
Commissioner Africa, gauging from your appreciation of the Filipino voter, assuming that this proposal of Father Bernas is accepted by the Commission, do you think the Filipino people or the ordinary voter would be able to appreciate the value of such an exercise?
Since we are embarking on a job that has no precedent in our country, it is difficult to guess what the reaction of our people will be in being confronted with a plebiscite involving the ratification of the Constitution, not as a whole, but as in parts.
But we are a people known for setting a precedent, like the bloodless revolution we had in February. Why not in this form of ratification? Not that I am for the proposal of Father Bernas. On the other hand, Father, doesn't this type of ratification breed confusion and more divisiveness among the people?
Well, I'm glad you used the word divisiveness, because precisely I think we're drafting this Constitution. One of the reasons we're drafting it is we want it to be an instrument of unification of the people. Now, if you have a Constitution that is presented in parts and all of them accepted, then it becomes undoubtedly a unifying document. Whereas if you present it here, take it or leave it, the state of New York, when it revised its Constitution in 1970 also, I think it was 1968, they presented it in a take it or leave it basis, and the New York Times ran an editorial saying, take it or leave it, we leave it. And the New York the New Yorkers rejected the whole thing. But so if you present this now, they will probably accept it as a whole. In fact, I'm sure they'll accept it as a whole. But then they said, you know, we accepted this because of the fact that we wanted elections. But we really don't like the provisions on social justice, or we don't like the provisions on the national economy. So those will continue to fester as wounds which can divide the nation. Whereas, if you give them the opportunity to pass judgment on them individually, and then you can say to them, look, you were opposed to it, the rule of majority, the majority rule is the rule in the nation, the majority of the people accepted it, bow your heads to it.
We shall get back to that after we take a short break, Commissioner Bengson. Pagkatapos na ho ng break.
Bembo, laos na ako sa disco!
Oo, ito uso mo yun. Hindi ka papansinin ng chicks niyan. Pare, nasa nagdadala?
Gusto mo dito.
At sabihin naman, mas gusto namin ito.
You're everything, a good beer should be my little beer. You're the life of the beer.
Nasa nagdadala yan?
My little beer. You're the life of the city.
Perfect. Everything's just perfect on a Sunday. I just read, breakfast leisurely, and enjoy Nescafe Master Roast, the premium brew of the world's finest coffees. Sunday is the best time for the fresh brewed taste and aroma of Nescafe Master Roast, the premium brew for your best coffee moments.
Nescafe Master Roast, the premium brew for your best coffee moments.
For the rich, satisfying taste in cigarettes, Casino 100 menthol filters. Casino for people on the go.
This week in Airwolf.
Name is Sinjin Hawk.
Hey, that's my name.
He's on.
Boston, do your brother is Tiger!
I saw Sinjin go down.
You saw him killed.
He wasn't moving.
He's not coming back. Oh, my God.
Airwolf, Tuesday, 7:30 p.m. here on RPN The Leader. Be a part of the adventures of a little girl from a magic kingdom where all the colors of the universe are created. Rainbow Bright, the hit TV cartoon series in the U.S., will bring a world full of colors into your child's imagination. Watch it every Saturday at 6 p.m. on RPN, The Leader.
We're back on Street Pulse on the issue of the process of ratification of the proposed charter. And before we took a break, Commissioner Bengson wanted to comment on Father Bernas' answer.
Dahil dito sa mga plug, nawawala yung momentum ko.
Channel 9, makinig kayo.
Okay, anyway, what I wanted to say was this, that, okay, if a particular voter, or if the people would say, well, we have certain objections to these particular articles, but on the whole, we really like the Constitution because it's pro-people, pro-God, etc. We vote for it. That means to say that they rise above their objections. And they look at the Constitution as a whole, which is really an integrated part. Each part of the Constitution is an essential part of an integrated whole.
Is it really pro-people? Yes.
Now, what I'm saying is that if they feel so strongly against certain articles, then they should reject it. They really should reject it and let the whole thing go to pot. But the fact that they say, I look at this whole Constitution, I have certain objections over certain sections, articles, but the whole thing is good, I vote for it, that means they rise above their objections, and for that very reason, it becomes really strong.
So you don't
and
agree,
it's a unifying factor.
So you don't agree, Commissioner, that well, certain people are saying that because of the various controversies that have marked the deliberations in the CONCOM, like the bases, the social justice provision, especially on land reform, there is a danger that because of those provisions alone, the whole Constitution might be rejected.
No, because they have another chance to bring their thoughts to the President, to the Executive, at the proper time. I'm talking about the bases. The anti-bases people lost, shall we say. But the proper time, as I've always said, now is not the proper time. So come 1991 or 1987 or 1988, when we are supposed to negotiate with the U.S., then everybody, including myself, if I haven't changed my mind about my opinion, then I can bring to bear, I can bring my thoughts and my ideas upon the Executive, upon the President, at the proper time. There is still a chance. It's not foreclosed. And so with the other provisions in the Constitution. If they have objections over certain sections in that Constitution, they still have the chance to convince the Executive and the other agencies of the government. So on the whole, that Constitution is good, they will vote for it.
Commissioner Bengson, yes, Father, before you comment on Commissioner Bengson's answer, makinig po tayo sa mga sinasabi ng mga leaders sa mga cause-oriented movements. You think generally that the draft would be accepted by the people?
Well, I think the draft, if proposed as a whole, on a take-it-or-leave-it basis, will be approved simply because the overriding concern might be stability of the government and the desire of the Aquino government to have a constitution that will bring us back to full constitutionalism. However, I don't think the proposal of the CONCOM to have it ratified on a wholesale basis will be very favorable, because in favor of stability, we might be exchanging our sovereignty. So that might not be a very favorable situation.
Alam mo, we are not given much choice in this thing. And I am afraid, I hear this popularly being said, if you don't have the Constitution ratified, it will create instability and so on, no? But what if the Constitution is far below, you know, the expectations of the people? So you are being practically blackmailed into ratifying the Constitution, otherwise you will be a source of instability. Exactly. Yeah. And this is unfair to the people. Perhaps maybe we should have alternatives.
This idea of blackmail only is relevant. I do not quite agree to that. You see, we are going through a transition, and I do not even think there is enough time really to discuss mainly intelligently. There is a communication problem to reach out to our people and really get them to discuss these issues more intelligently. And this is why I am for presenting a fairly simple constitution wherein all major issues have been resolved, leaving aside in the meantime those issues that are controversial and that will divide us. there we need more time for discussion, you see.
Our leaders from the cost-oriented movements are not too pleased with the way things are going at the CONCOM and with the proposed charter. Father Bernas, what do you have to say about this and how your proposal would benefit them?
Precisely, a system of a divided, a package ratification will give us the opportunity to find out who is right, they or the others who oppose them. Peps Bengson here was saying that after all, they will have the opportunity to discuss these later. But we have the opportunity now. We have the golden opportunity now, and why put off for tomorrow what we can do today? Noel Soriano himself in the clip was saying that we should leave aside the controversial things first. Fine if we did that, but the fact is we have adopted controversial things.
What if those issues are not accepted? Hindi ba magiging incoherent ang ating constitution when the core will be ratified by the people, pero those other issues are not?
I do not think so. I do not think so. Because, for instance, let us say we were to present the whole article on social justice separately, and the people were to reject this whole article. Then what happens? We fall back on the rather brief section on social justice in the Constitution that is in effect now. And there is a very general provision there on social justice, which can cover practically everything almost everything that's in, that is provided for in greater detail in what we have drafted. Similarly, if we were to reject, let us say, the article, if the people were to reject the article on the national economy and natural resources, then we fall back on the old provision on the national economy and the natural resources. And they would fit in also as a whole. Because even in the matters that divided us, for instance, on the national economy, there were matters which are already provided for in the present Constitution. And what divided us was precisely the fact that the majority decided to keep what was in the old provision. Those were the main things that divided us as far as the article on national economy is concerned.
Do I understand, Father, that your proposal amounts to having the people vote on whole articles of the Constitution?
It could be done that way. Roughly, the only ones I would, if I were, let us say, to package this myself, I would put practically all of them together. I'd probably separate the article on social justice, separate the article on the national economy, and then possibly the section on the basis and the section which will provide for the term of the president and the vice president. So all in all, you would have a total of 5 votes.
Commissioner Bengson, would you want to react to what Father Bernas just said?
Yeah. The problem with that, as I see it, is that if you have people, voters, who have objections over certain articles, if you present them in parts, even if their objections are not so big, since they have the choice, i-reject na natin yan, and we approve the rest. So you don't
but that's
give
the whole point, Commissioner.
you don't give them the opportunity to really look at the Constitution as a whole and really look at the integrated whole.
Baka yung tingnan na lang nila yung...
Titignan na lang nila. Ayaw nila yung social justice. Maski na hindi ganong objections nila, porque meron silang opportunity dyan na i-reject, re-reject nila yon. Samantala, if you present it to them as a whole and say, tingnan naman ninyo ito, mayroon kayong konting objection dyan, pero dito naman okay naman lahat yung mga provisions na ito. Tingnan naman yung buo. Kung nakakabuti sa bayan, itong buong constitution na ito, di aprobahan ninyo yung buo. So mag-iisip yung tao ngayon, titingnan niya as a whole, the whole perspective. And so he will not say, okay, konti lang ang objection ko dyan, hindi bale na yan sapagkat the whole constitution is good, I vote for it. But if his objection really to social justice or to national economy is so great that he really believes that it's bad for the nation, he'll reject the whole thing.
Pero ano ba talagang ma-approve na process of ratification? We've been talking about it. What is more likely to be approved by the CONCOM?
we have
Commissioner
not
Bengson.
really talked about it in that great detail. But if you just go by
Tradition.
or if your criterion would be who are those who are advocating presentation of the Constitution in parts. So far, I heard for Father Bernas and now Chito Gascon and Ed Garcia, but I have not heard a majority of the people say that they would want to present this Constitution in parts.
Commissioner Africa, may mga balita na December 1 daw ho yung scheduled date ng plebiscite, no? Now, considering, lagay na natin na matatanggap yung proposal ni Father Bernas, considering na maraming bagong nilalaman yung saligang batas, do you think there will be enough time for, as Ed Garcia was saying, for people to incisely or intelligently discuss these various propositions?
Even without presenting the Constitution in parts, just presenting it as a whole, December 1st is only exactly 80 days from today.
Is that
and,
enough time?
Yet the 60-day period for the plebiscite from the time the final draft is submitted to the President has not even commenced. So even the preparatory steps to be taken by COMELEC would probably be difficult to accomplish within the time remaining from October 15. I understand the final draft. The present COMELEC is composed of commissioners who are far removed from the Marcos regime in terms of their outlook, their attitudes, their
But
background.
won't it be protecting the existing regime?
Existing regime? No, we are an independent
Yes.
body. We're not
Just
supposed to be...
Siguro we have some very important questions here. One is addressed to Father Bernas. It's from Mr. Man Legro of Pasig, no? I agree with your position, Father, but why do you say that a section rejected by the people means falling back on that section in the 1973 Constitution? Is there such a provision in the 1986 Constitution? What if there is no similar provision?
We could make sure that we put something like that. Because usually in the transitory provision of the Constitution, you have a provision which would say that anything that is contrary to what we approve will be considered any law, any statute, or any provision of the Freedom Constitution. We could say, of course, that this completely supersedes any other constitution. That's one way of doing this. But precisely if we adopt this system, we will have to take some kind of a fallback position and put in a transitory provision saying that if what we have in here is not approved, then its counterpart in the Freedom Constitution could continue. If it is really necessary to have them. If it is really let us just suppose, for instance, that we separated the matter of the term of the president, and let us say that the Constitutional Commission were to propose separately a provision saying that the term of the president, vice president, 6 years, and the term of the incumbents will continue, let us say, until this month and that day in 1992, and that is rejected. Supposing that is rejected, what happens?
We shall answer that question after we take this break. We'll be right back.
Yeah, we will wait.
Joins solemn procession for peace. The theme is Proclaimers of Peace, Instruments of Justice at the Manila Cathedral. 8 a.m. there's a Eucharistic celebration. At 9:15 in the morning there's a solemn procession.
Loren, before we took a break, Commissioner Bengson here wanted to refer back to the discussion a while ago on the date of the plebiscite, yeah, because according to him, there's a problem regarding this. Commissioner Bengson?
Yes, if it's true that we are going to have the plebiscite on December 1st, as articulated by Chairman Felipe, we are going to have a problem there. Firstly, because we must present the Constitution within 60 days now.
From submission, Commissioner Bengson.
From submission. So if we finish our Constitution, say, on or before October 15, we barely have enough time to really campaign for the ratification. And that compounds the problem of COMELEC because they also don't have time to prepare for this
So
plebiscite.
medyo may kalabuan yung October 1, Commissioner.
Mahigpit, talagang mahigpit yun.
December 1. Which brings us to another
December 1,
question for
December 1.
Commissioner Africa from Jose Santos. Is COMELEC ready to have a plebiscite of the proposed constitution, even in part?
Well, as I said earlier, while there is no precedent on ratifications of constitutions in part domestically in the Philippines, if that is the decision of the commission, the Constitutional Commission, I think the COMELEC has no choice except to present it in parts, because we are doing the mechanical act of presenting it to the people.
Here's a follow-up question to the earlier question thrown to Father Bernas. This is from Juan Reyes. No? He says, if some parts of the proposed constitution are rejected by the people, he said we will have to go back to the 1970 constitution. But can we not instead convene another commission to discuss the rejected issues?
Well, once you have approved, once you have to approve the provision and amendments, then it will now be up to Congress whether to convene. Under the provision we have, once we approve that provision, the only ones who can propose amendments to the Constitution would be either Congress or a Constitutional Convention, or the people directly through initiative and referendum.
And another question here for Father Bernas from Josefa Reyes. Can you comment on the statement made by Minister Maceda in another TV talk show, I think that's Tell the People, that the ratification of the proposed constitution would automatically mean the legitimizing the Aquino government? Don't you think this is actually confusing the more important issues in the proposed constitution?
Well, it's not just confusing the more important issues of the Constitution, but also confusing the status of the President and the Vice President, and even the status of the Constitutional Commission. The present President is legitimate. The only issue is what is her term. What is her term? Because if the President is not legitimate, we are not legitimate because we accepted because we accepted the appointment from the President.
Commissioner Bengson, you want to
For the first time tonight, I agree with Father Bernas.
Well, here's another question to Attorney Africa. Ito, kinakabahan niya ito dahil I think he's from Tawi-Tawi. Richard Reyes, who will campaign for the ratification in Tawi-Tawi since there isn't any OIC appointed. Are you in a position to answer that?
Bengson volunteered to go there.
I was there during the canvassing.
And the comment from Nina Reyes, don't you think that the controversy over the manner of ratification of the Constitution stems from the fact that the Commission was not elected by the people? If they were elected by the people, perhaps the people will trust them more. Father, you mentioned that.
Well, as I was saying, what's one way of satisfying those who feel very strongly that the Commission should have been elected? That's one way of satisfying them. So give them an opportunity to have a more individualized judgment on the parts of the
Another question here from Mr. Ortesa addressed to Commissioner Bengson. You want to add something to
Yeah,
that?
on the other hand,
Ayaw pa rin.
on the other hand, you know, after having seen the product of the work of this commission, which Father Bernas says is very good, and I agree with him again on that. Yes. Then the people will know that although the commissioners were not elected, but were appointed, the appointments were very valid and they were very good.
But why is it the leaders of the cause-oriented movements are not even happy with the appointment, saying na mga certain sectors talaga ay hindi represented, medyo elitist nga ang appointment. But altogether a different issue, of course.
Yeah, well, because they probably wanted the majority of their people to have been appointed.
Another question here. Will the Constitution be, addressed to Commissioner Bengson or Commissioner Bernas, will the Constitution be permanent law of the land for the next generation? Because after the 1935, after the 1973, after the Freedom Constitution, now you have the 1986 Constitution. You might just keep on starting again without end.
It's really permanent because that is the intention until the next Constitutional Convention comes. When, we don't know.
It's meant to be permanent, but remember that we started a tradition. We started something which must stop somewhere, and the Marcos regime changing the constitution was rather easy and frequent, and so we have to give them something more satisfactory.
Father, another question from James Alan Tombago. What is the role that priests are taking in drafting the Constitution?
Well, I don't know what the role they have, because when I'm there, I'm not conscious of the fact that I'm a priest. I'm a citizen of the Philippines.
Well, we thank thank you for having joined us this evening. On behalf of my colleague here, Butchabad, we'd like to thank you for having joined us. We'll see you next Friday.
Thank you. Butchabad, good evening.
This is Street Pulse.
You know, Loren, since February, there's been a tremendous growth in media, and in fact, in Metro Manila alone, there are about 24 newspapers circulating, and I guess that says a lot about freedom of expression.
Yes, Butch, and this freedom of expression has given rise to a lot of talk shows, including the birth of Street Pulse, and has given birth also to the proliferation and the new venue for the multitude of ideas.
So, and how far should this free expression go? Shouldn't the government impose a modicum of control on the media?
Or should the government just let it be, or adopt a laissez-faire attitude towards it? Well, now let's take a look at our lessons from a recent past.
And we cannot keep on withdrawing. They asked us to withdraw yesterday. When I talked to Mr. Really, he said, you talk to you, we withdraw anything.
My order is to disperse
We cannot
the
withdraw
crowd
all the time, Mr. President.
without shooting them. No, hold on. You disperse the crowd without shooting them. Propaganda lies without...
Channel 4 is on the air again to serve the people.
When President Marcos lost his grip of the media, he lost his empire.
No intention of resigning, and we will defend the Republic to the last breath of our life and to the last drop of blood in our body.
Regime sought to extend its tenure of power in 1972. One of its first acts was to close down radio, television, and newspaper facilities, the Tri-Media. The regime submitted to the tenet, he who controls the media controls the mind. So for 14 years, Malacanang made fairy tales out of facts. It bent, twisted, and in some instances, tried to obliterate the news.
Mabuhay ang Pangulo Marcos. Mabuhay ang unang ginang. Mabuhay ang sambayanang Pilipino.
The palace expanded the role and resources of the Government Media Center to promote further its version of Filipino ideology and theories about holes in the universe. Those who attempted to disagree were arrested or permanently silenced. The new government brought with it the freedom of expression that saw the proliferation of newspapers, which is now on its way of regaining its reputation as the freest press in Asia. Broadcast stations are back in the hands of people who can openly criticize the government.
Our followers and sympathizers, civilian and military, including Muslim brothers, were ready to strike anywhere in the Philippines.
But freedom has its excesses. There are inevitably interest groups who would wish to have control or own the media to promote self-serving ends. Before the martial law era, in fact, the media were said to be power brokers and kingmakers. And worse, some publications were disguised public relations tentacles for big businesses. These are the fund lessons that the Constitutional Commission considered when it drafted provisions on the control of media, and even of, indirectly, advertising. But the provisions are open-ended. The CONCOM has left the matter to the legislative body to decide. But the question is, who shall control the lawmakers? Will not many of them be products of the media? So will they even dare regulate the ownership of media? Will they regulate its contents? Will it be laissez-faire once more?
Should the government take a laissez-faire attitude towards the media? To answer those questions, we have our distinguished guests for the evening. Butch?
Yeah, to share with us their views on this subject, we have Commissioner Florangel Rosario Braid of the Constitutional Commission, and she also heads the committee, I think, that proposed some provisions on this aspect. We also have, to my left, Mr. Conrado Limcauco, who is the officer in charge of the People's Television Force. And further left is Engineer Sylvia Marcelo, who is the chief of the Broadcast Division of the National Telecommunications Commission. And finally, but not the least, to my right is Mr. Alejandro Roses, who is the editor-in-chief of the Manila Times.
But I'm sure you all have a lot of questions concerning this topic on media monopoly, which has been characteristic of the previous administration. You can phone in your questions at 993-733 and 977669. But before that, we'll take a short break. We'll be right back. We're back on Street Buzz, and I'd like to ask Commissioner Braid, what provisions the CONCOM come up with so far regarding media monopoly and the so-called laissez-faire attitude toward media?
Yes, I think I will really come up with provisions that respond to the needs of the time, and also that these provisions recognize how vital communication information is in nation building. So that one provision, which is in the Declaration of Principles, is to this effect, that communication and information is a vital resource for nation building. No? Then one provision, which is an omnibus provision, recognizes the responsibility of the state to provide that environment whereby private enterprise, media enterprises that are initiated and implemented by private sector or community organizations should be encouraged, respecting, of course, freedom of the speech and the press. But that this provision encourages the full development of capability, of course, commission structures, which would refer to organizational structures, professional development. That will encourage the full development of communication.
Yes, that's the broader scope of provisions.
And then the more specific within this broad scope is the, that provision that will regulate and prohibit monopolies,
So that's
that
the,
public
Commissioner, excuse me,
interest.
that's the general rule as far as the provision goes.
Yes.
A total ban on
monopolies.
Yeah.
Well, there are exceptions, like, for instance, when the public interest so requires, would mean that...
Like what cases?
Knowing that the mass media, television and radio, are capital-intensive enterprises, we could have exceptions, such as, for instance, a newspaper which caters to the wider audience, a national newspaper, can have another paper if it has different readership. Like, for instance, let's say, to be specific, Malaya can still function and have Masa. And the same with Bulletin and Tempo could still function because they have different readerships.
How about Trimedia? I mean, a family or a group owning a TV station?
Well, yes, that is possible if they don't have a single market. In other words, what we have here is this provision really prohibits ownership of more than one in a single market.
So it's not very prohibitive.
It's not prohibitive. Like for instance, if you own a radio station with, say, 5 kilowatt, no, would not cater to the entire country. In other words, it's community specific, no. So you can still have, have a bulletin, for instance, can own a radio station that reaches only the community of, say, Manila or Visayas or Mindanao.
Loren, I'd like to ask Mr. Roses, who's been in the publishing business for some time now. No? What do you think about this idea, which is for the most part discussed in the Commission, about the idea of dispersing the ownership of media so that no family or no particular group controls it?
Well, I'm not against it at all. I'm all for it.
Yeah.
But we must not confuse cause with effect. Let's put it this way. During the days of Marcos, Benedicto owned one newspaper, and let us say Danding Coangco owned another, Menzi owned another, and other tutas owned another, and each tuta owned the radio station. But actually, they were all synchronized.
Yes, I think Mr. Roses is right there. There's no monopoly there, but it's the same group or cronies owning the same kind of media. So how would you try to stop and prevent
I think we've solved the problem of cronyism, no, in an earlier resolution, so that that provision in national economy would prohibit cronyism. Let's put it this way, or so that, and that we can, the Congress, of course, can define the specifics in terms of what really constitutes what is a family, what's family ownership, how many, what is the consanguinity, for instance, up to what degree, no, would a family member be not allowed to own because he is related to an owner, no? So that will be defined later, but we will the provisions. Well, I have responded really to the trauma that we have suffered under the last regime, whereby we all experience how concentration of media resources in one family or in a group of cronies could really ruin the entire country. No?
I don't see the high concentration of family newspapers, for example, in the Marcos regime. As I stated, they were owned by different families, but they were synchronized from the top. I don't think that Benedicto was related to Danding Coangco or the other newspaper or the Romualdez's. They don't have to be related.
So you're trying to say that it was a matter of control, even if they were owned by different entities. It was a matter of control and it's a synchronization from one person.
Well, as I said, what happened is that reporters were just messenger boys. They went to Malacanang or to the government offices, they were given a press release, and then they just printed these things.
Mr. Roses, I'm sure our friend here from the government, our friend Dodi Limcalco from PTV4 would be in a position to answer that. How could you answer the question of our friend Anding Roses from the Manila Times, saying that although even during the Marcos regime there have been different owners of different newspapers and television stations, but they would come up with the same product at the end.
Well,
how could we prevent this situation?
I think there is no hard and fast set of formulas that we can adopt to prevent this. I think the Constitutional Commission is on the right track, but I'd like to backtrack a little bit and just it begs the question: should government at all attempt to regulate media? And we're talking media in terms of the print media and the two wings of broadcast media, which are radio and television. Okay. Apparently, there are arguments to be said from both camps, and the reaction now towards some form of regulation stems from the sad experience of the Marcos years, when in fact, either through families or through connections, as Mr. Roses was saying earlier, there was an abuse of the power of media. Media is an extremely powerful tool. You can make somebody believe in something, but there are limits, because the government propaganda arm during the Marcos years, in fact, made people try to believe in something and ended up not fulfilling its role. I would think that attempts to regulate media should stop when it infringes on freedom of speech or press. Okay. Now that's a very, very dangerous hairline to tread.
And how do we know?
Okay. That's I think, the line that Congress and maybe the Constitutional Commission has to figure out. Totally unregulated media, in terms of its ownership, is an extreme end. Laissez-faire, by its very definition, means as long as you have the money, as long as you have the access to resources, let it be. Okay? Totally regulated media would say, you're on this channel, you can print this, you cannot print this. I think neither extreme is what we're talking about here, but regulation which assures that that the majority of the people have access to truth, have access to entertainment, that I think is not manipulated by any one interest group. Not necessarily families, as Mr. Rosa says, no, but interest groups that can pull a fast one over the public at large. So that's the line. That
Before we go on any further than that, Loren, I'd like to ask our Mrs. Marcelo here, who is with the National Telecommunications Commission. Since you regulate ownership of radio and TV, particular division, what is the current profile now of radio and television ownership? Is it widely dispersed, or is it still more or less controlled by a particular grouping, or is the government heavily involved in?
Well, the broadcasters at the time of President Marcos is still the same broadcasters we have now, except for a few, like the case of ABS-CBN, who had come back, and perhaps the broadcasters before the martial law era, like Mr. Chino Roses, who would want to operate back his radio stations. I would say that the cronyism is no longer there. Perhaps there might be some cronyism in a lesser degree, in the sense that there are still groups, but no longer guided or controlled by one head, just like President Marcos before. There are still groupings.
I think Mr. Rosas would like to comment on that.
No, I'd like to make a comment here. No? First, let's go back to before the martial law, because that's the normal state of things. Let us take the Manila Times, where we pride ourselves in saying that the Manila Times was the most trusted newspaper. Why was it the most trusted newspaper? In my opinion, it was the most trusted newspaper because we had no other interest except the newspaper. Now, a newspaper owner, for example, that is defending a bigger business, like I don't want to mention names, but for example, if I own an airlines and I open a newspaper to defend my airlines, or let's say I own sugar, I own newspaper to defend it, then that newspaper is just a weapon. But the Manila Times, that's all we had, the newspaper, so we were not defending any vested interest. So I believe that that is the main thrust that we should follow. Not so much monopoly, but if you're in the newspaper business, you should be there strictly.
That's a very interesting point, Dodi, and we shall come back to that after we take a short break. Street Pulse will be back. We're still discussing on Street Pulse what stand the government should take in treating the media. Should it take a laissez-faire attitude towards the media? But before we go on, we'd like to remind you that you can phone in your questions within Street Pulse at 993-733 and 977668. And before we took a break, Mr. Anding Roses wanted to say something about the quite controversial CONCOM provision. You were saying?
No, I believe that, for example, what's wrong with having newspapers if that's all you've got and you are not defending vested interest? I think it's dangerous if a man, for example, has a multinational firm and then opens a newspaper because he wants to defend his multinational firm. Now that is dangerous. But if I have 5 newspapers, but that's all I've got, I'm not defending vested interest.
Are you trying to say that you are against the CONCOM provision and that this will not solve the problem of media monopoly?
No, I'm not against. I am for what they're trying to do. Set up certain regulations and control. Like we were talking about freedom. Well, you know, the printed word is just another form or an extension of the freedom of speech. Now, you know, we have freedom of speech, but that does not give me the right to go to a theater and shout fire. So there has to be some form of control.
Yeah, but Mr. Rosas, what you're saying is it's all right to own Tri-Media or to own a newspaper, a television, a radio station, for as long as you don't have any business or political interest to protect.
No, I did not say that. But I said that it's better for a person to own Tri-Media if he is really in media and communication than for him to own a multinational firm and then open a newspaper to defend his vested interest. That is more dangerous, yet there is no provision against that. This is my point. I'm not against the provisions.
Commissioner Briggs?
Yes, may I? If we look at media ownership also as media as business enterprises, I think we have a provision on monopolies in general so that it can be classified as a business enterprise. So that the fact that we prevent monopolies would therefore prevent any one individual or corporation engaging in several enterprises.
What about this? I'm sorry, please.
Yeah, I think we run into, well, I agree with what Mr. Rosas was saying. That complexifies matters because you not only look at number of families owning number of stations or newspapers, but you look into political motives of families or economic interests of families. And I'm not very sure that that is within the realm of Congress or the Constitutional Commission. But that is in fact a reality. I think one must think in terms of not only limiting the extent of media ownership of any given interest group, whether it be a business interest group or a political interest group, but also in relation to the other interests which that party may hold. And that's going to be a little difficult, I think, to legislate, because you're going to have to ask, Dr. Braid, aside from 6 radio stations, do you plan to run for political office, or what other businesses do you have? And that's like almost like an inquisition. So
yes, Mr. Rosas.
May I go into something specific, no? I am editor of the Manila Times. Chino, my cousin, is now publisher of the Chronicle. My nephew, Tony Rosas, is editor-in-chief of the Star. But we're not doing any harm. We don't agree.
Yes, how about that?
Will that fall under the
what happens? They're all from the same family. Would that be prohibited by?
I think the fact that we do not have really very rigid rules, and that in this case, for instance, where we can show that these papers are not really are independent in their own way, no? Then I think the fact that you are related would have no bearing, because we do know for certain that all these newspapers are independent and are competitors. But let me add one point which I missed earlier, and that is that we encourage cooperative ownership, so that if one monopoly here would mean ownership of a majority of the shares, so that if you own 10%, for instance, of the shares in a newspaper or a radio station or a television station, then you're not prohibited from ownership, because your ownership, your equity is minimal. So monopoly, we have not come up with clear-cut rules, but I would assume that when Congress defines this, it would be at least 70% ownership.
Commissioner, we've been discussing about private entities. What about the government? Right now, we still have the government station, PTV4, and this channel and Channel 13 are still sequestered by the government. It seems that the government is having a monopoly of these stations. Dati paano bang lagay niyan? Hindi ang private, ang gobyerno ngayon may monopoly.
Let me answer that, but just short comments on both the points of Mr. Rosas and Commissioner Braid. First, the fact that you may not be members of your family, although owning different media interests, may not be colluding, doesn't mean that it's all right. So just because something is that way for one family does not mean that it will be that way for all other families. And so I think it's the task, in fact, of government to make sure that in case there is a non-Rosas group of people that who are not disposed towards healthy cooperation and competition, that do in fact decide to own a chain of newspapers, that perhaps there should be a mechanism, a structure set in place to regulate this. So I think that my point here is, I laud, in fact, the members of your family for taking that stance as far as print media is concerned, but the Philippines is not populated by all noble men like the Rosa said. So maybe that's the role of government. The second point...
Before you answer the second point, Rodi, I'd like to ask Engineer Marcelo here. Yeah, we go back to your question, but are there existing regulations that prohibit monopoly or in the concentration of ownership of media in a particular family, group, or individual?
There is none.
There is none.
As I said, the regulations that have been being implemented as of this date is still the regulation we have been implementing during the time of President Marcos.
Carry over lang
It's a
lahat.
carry over.
No prohibition. So
Yeah,
as long as you can afford it.
Because remember, President Marcos abolished Congress, the legislative body, and the regulation that we have been imposing, have been implementing actually, is the old radio control law, which was enacted way back at the time of President Quezon. It was 1931. And in the absence of any legislative body right now, there is really no new regulations that was injected into the National Telecommunications Commission regulation, but it's just a carryover of what has been being implemented at the time of President Marcos.
Now we go back to that.
Yes, Dodi, what about, kala ko lulusot ka na sa akin eh.
Yes, Loren.
What
Okay.
about the apparent government monopoly of television?
Well, what has happened, as a matter of fact, is de facto, after the February Revolution, we were in a position where the government exercised control over channels 9, 13, and then channel 2 before it was returned back to the Lopezes, and of course People's Television 4. However, I think short term we should differentiate between exercising de facto control and the fact that government has not in any way imposed any regulatory function as far as editorial content is concerned. All one has to do is listen to the editorials of the Channel 4 News, and you will find that they are as often critical of the government as they are in praise of the government, as well as the public affairs shows of other channels. So one has to divorce the fact of de facto control from the use of these media, which the government finds itself in possession of right now, that there is absolutely no censorship, absolutely no programming interference right now as far as the stations which are under the control of government are concerned. More long term, what I do know is that there are definite plans afoot to privatize many of these stations, with the government perhaps keeping control of one broadcast facility, but again, not to be used in a propaganda way, but as the medium of government to transmit its messages and to serve to stimulate broadcasting in general towards more meaningful entertainment and information, so to speak. So, more long term, there are plans afoot to privatize the other networks that happen to be in our control at the present time.
Excluding PTV4.
Excluding one broadcast facility, which for the moment looks like it's PTV4. That's why this discussion right now is very important, because the ownership, in fact, of how to privatize the networks which are under the control of government, although they are under the control of independent boards of directors, is a key question which must be addressed in the near future.
We shall continue with our discussion after we take a break. We'll be right back. We're back on our very interesting discussion here in Street Pulse. Mr. Rosas, there has been some attempts at socializing, the ownership of certain newspapers. Does the Manila Times have any plans for this, and what do you think about this?
I think
when you say socialize, I assume that it will be government-owned. That is my concept of socialization.
Isn't it, or rather,
I think there are attempts
the ownership
voluntary
or cooperative ownership.
It is not a new idea. Let me explain, no? Because you belong to the younger generation, fortunately for you. let's take the free press. The free press was owned by the people who ran the free press. And the Daily Express sold their shares to the employees.
Yeah, right, that's correct.
But it was not free. It was under Marcos.
So it does not affect at all the
No, it did not,
content and
it did not affect. Now, another thing, you know, they believe that if you sell the shares to your employees, they will have a voice. Now, anybody that has had any experience with a corporation knows that being a minority stockholder is entirely meaningless. All you can do is attend stockholders' meetings once a year. But to have a voice in a corporation, you have to be a director. I would also like to add that I have never been a director of a newspaper. Never, because I never had the money to even be a small part-time owner of a newspaper. I've always been merely a writer.
Always been in the operations aspect
Yes,
of the
a
newspaper.
columnist, now an editor.
Mr. Ross, what's prompting, for example, papers like Malaya, Inquirer, or Daily Express into sharing their stocks with their employees or with the public?
Well, it is a misconception because I'm a very logical person. If you tell me, let us do this to improve the paper, like they say, let us sell it to the employees so that there will be more free flow of information. That was the term used in the CONCOM. But they have not said why it will have more free flow of information. What I'm trying to say is this. It is true that there are publishers who don't believe in freedom of the press. But there are just as many newspapermen who don't believe in freedom of the press. What happened during the times of Marcos? Well, it was possible for two reasons. You had publishers and newspapermen who did not believe in freedom of the press. Proof. The funeral of Ninoy. No newspaper carried it.
No television.
I ran as a Laban candidate in 1978. Nobody ever carried Laban in the newspapers, in any newspaper. We could not even buy advertisement. We could not answer the attacks against us. But they were owned by different families, different people, and some were owned by the people working there. Now, I'm sorry, please.
Maybe I might respond because I'm with Inquirer and it is a cooperatively owned paper, and we find that although this type of the goal cannot make, well, it is an evolutionary process, let me put it, and that however that the fact that we are striving towards more democratic participation, I think would therefore place in everybody that responsibility of wanting to try hard, wanting to, you know, to do more and to encourage him to say if he is a news reporter to do better than if he were just an employee, you know.
Well, as I said, if what you mean is socialization or government-owned, that is an entirely different thing. But the problem there is that it won't criticize the government.
No, it's not government-owned. It's owned by those that those that work it. No?
Well, you mentioned a few newspapers that are owned by
the employees.
Are they really as free as the other newspapers that are not? Are they really more responsible?
It doesn't matter.
No, what I'm trying to say is the proof of the pudding is in the eating.
That's true. We can ask Sylvia here. Does it in television and in radio? Are there ownerships which are scattered and distributed among members, the employees itself? And does it matter in radio and TV?
Well, there are I don't recall any broadcasting station where it is the station is owned by the employees, except for one group after the February Revolution in Zamboanga, where the employees took over the management of a television station.
Why do you think it's more prone? The cooperative system is more used in the print medium than in radio or television?
Well, I don't know in print media or in print medium, but in broadcasting, it would be very, very impractical because of the very big investment involved. Mostly the investment are made by the directors and officers of the corporation, and as our guest stated here, Mr. Roses, stated that the minority stockholders definitely would not have any voice at all. in the affair, in running the affairs of the
So it seems that it
broadcasting
doesn't affect the editorial content at all, whether it is socialized in ownership or whatever you call it, cooperative system or...
I think over time it would, no? It's just that we believe, you know, like in agricultural cooperatives, it took time before the farmers were really realized the full intent of being members. But I think there is recognized that productivity was higher when they are members of, when they are co-owners than when they are just mere employees. So this is the belief of you know, institutions that have co-ownership. So perhaps these experiments cannot, the impact cannot be felt now, but over time they would.
Lorraine, I guess you should start going. Okay,
make a comment
then
here.
No, I just want to begin by taking certain realities or on the situation in the press, no? You know, up to now, we only have about 500,000 subscribers. All over. No?
That's the totality of it.
This is the totality of it. Now, I want to make a distinction between reader and subscriber. I know many people that read all the newspapers, but they do not buy them. See, they just pass it on. I don't know if you know that in the provinces, this is what is happening. Many people don't buy the newspaper, they rent it. They give 10 centavos and they read it in the newsstands, all right? Now,
quite a bit.
Second, there are only, in my opinion, about 5 people right now in Manila, in Metro Manila, that are real editors of the newspaper. The others are editors in name only. What I'm trying to say is that these are certain limitations that we have. Now, what we have now is a phenomenon that happened in Manila immediately after liberation. After liberation, there were even more newspapers than we have now. Arsenio Lacson had a newspaper, a very popular column in this corner, and everybody says, you watch the newspaper of Arsenio Lacson. But he was not a newspaper man. Another one was Pepe Jokno, was in a newspaper. Raul Manglapus was in a newspaper. Manny Manahan. One by one, they all folded up because they were not really newspaper men. And I can assure you that in 1 year, we now have 24 newspapers. There will only be 3 or 4.
Well, I guess it's time to go to the phone-in questions. We're gathering a lot, Loren. And here's one addressed to Engineer Mercado.
Marcelo.
Marcelo. It's Engineer Mercado. As per President Aquino's announcement, she said that she was going to break up family monopoly of media. The question is, how come certain newspapers and TV stations are back with certain families?
I read.
Can you please read it again, Attorney
Please read it
Butch-Abad?
again.
Would you? As far as President Aquino, as per President Aquino, she is breaking up family monopoly. How come Chronicle and ABS is back with the Lopezes?
I'd like to make a statement there.
Why did you make me read that, Butch?
No, wait, I'd like to state...
As Commissioner, not that I'm defending my home network, but I think Commissioner Braid said that Tri-Media is allowed by the government as long as you have different...
the Lopezes do not own the Chronicle. It is owned by 20 distinct people, investors.
Well, I think the NPC may not be the proper agency to answer that because I believe the decision to return ABS-CBN Channel 2 to the Lopez interest was made in combination out of the
government sector
PCGG and the Office of the President and the Ministry of Information.
And they're, after all, the rightful owners. And we have another question here for, I guess, for Mr. Rosas. Each newspaper has its own kind of readership and content, which sometimes contradict each other. What's being done about this? That's from John Lusong. Isn't limiting the ownership against the principles of democracy and free enterprise?
Well, that's it, because it's like telling me, for example, that I cannot be a lawyer because I already have a brother or a father that's a lawyer. That's very, very difficult. Now, this is the truth. You know, we are underestimating the people. Why? A newspaper is not selling news or information in the ultimate analysis. You know what media is doing? Actually, what we are doing is selling credibility. The minute you lose your credibility, you are finished. So why don't we let the public decide? Now, it's different, as you said, if I say, let's say, television. I am a multimillionaire, I open a TV station, and nobody else can. But for example, Marcos owned all the newspapers under martial law. Malaya could survive with a small press. So there is no danger there. The Inquirer could survive.
But maybe by another argument, if there were regulations that ensured that no one interest group or one power could take these on, then maybe it wouldn't have taken us 20 years to get rid of Mr. Marcos, because the information would have come across much sooner, the truth would have come out much sooner. But since there was none, then it maybe took 20 years to get for the people to realize that they were being conned by the irresponsible holders of media power.
Before we answer that, we'll have to take a break once again. We'll be right back. We're back on Street Pulse on the issue of whether the government should take a laissez-faire attitude towards the media or not. And we have a lot of interesting phoned-in questions. But before that, we'd like to remind you that you can write to the Ateneo Center for Social Policy and Public Affairs for your comments and suggestions, or whatever questions you have on
or
Street
suggestions
Pulse.
about topics.
Yes. Dodi, we have here a question for you from Hernando Soriano. Is it true that Benji Lozare, who happened to be my teacher at UP, is head of PTV4, I don't think NMPC and MOI? A lot of people say this.
Well, Dr. Lozare, Benji is a friend, is trying to sort out the behemoth that was the Marcos and Dania propaganda empire. Is trying to help us sort this out. And right now, he is trying to flesh out a rational broadcast policy. At the same time, he directly manages, I believe, the NMPC and the emerging Public Information Agency, which is an agency that is being proposed. It's not yet alive in fact under law, but it is, I believe, going to be organized soon, that will serve as a conduit for information at the various points in the Philippines. He is helping to rationalize the assets of the former Ministry of Information. I think what one has to understand is that there was just so much that was accumulated under the Marcos propaganda machinery. Several thousand people, several million pesos worth of equipment, that it takes some time to, say, spin off the various entities and fix it.
But why is it, Dodi, that those agencies, most are still existing?
I think there has been a lot of streamlining. A lot of it has been scaled down. If you look at the Malacanang press staff, the whole wing there that used to be occupied in the executive building is no longer present. Much of the employees that are redundant have had to be let go. At the same time, we're in a bind because there is a compassionate streak to this government, that a lot of these people who were with the Ministry of Information are dependent on Ministry of Information for jobs. And so it's being taken as fast as we can take it without dislocating too many people all of a sudden. And the planning for spinning off these various entities or closing them down altogether, I'd like to assure the audience, is being done and being addressed with all dispatch by myself, Teddy Boy Locsin, and Benji Lozare, who you just mentioned.
Here's another question. This is from a Marcos loyalist who claims to be an associate of Oliver Lozano. And his question to Mr. Limcaoco is, the people who are responsible for toppling Marcos out of the media, now, the same people are the very ones censoring views and thereby suppressing press freedom. For example, they confuse the people about the venue of loyalist rallies. What do you have to say to this, Mr. Limcaoco?
I'm not aware of any intentional confusing of the people as to the venue of loyalist rallies. If the gentleman would want to give us more specifics, maybe we can look into the matter.
Another interesting question here to address Mr. Rosas. During martial law, did Marcos close or sequester Manila Times, or did it lie low for a while?
Well, the word that they used was sequester. But sequestered then and now meant two different things. Because let's say the bulletin is sequestered, but they're allowed to continue operation. But in our case, the Manila Times was closed. And we were, as I said, the nation's most trusted newspaper, and we had the highest English. We were the highest in circulation as far as English-speaking newspapers were concerned in Asia.
You were both sequestered and closed then.
Well, they use the word sequestered. Actually,
Was that the time my grandfather was the editor of Manila Times?
That's right. That's right.
Here's another question, Loren, addressed to Engineer Mercado, and it goes like this. This is from Mr. De La Cruz. Marcelo, again, Mercado.
Inilipong pangalan ni...
Will the people allow the, another same question, Lopez's to regain the complex that the people regained after the revolution? I guess related to, this is the Bohol Avenue complex.
Well, yes, there are discussions afoot for the, after an appraisal of the properties, because we do realize that Bohol Avenue has tremendous political significance now to the people, since it was the media complex that the people said, enough, we're not going to hear any more of this Marcos foolishness from the then Marcos Channel 4, and they actively seized Channel 4 in the February Revolution. So we do realize that, and the Lopez's have in fact begun discussions with the government in terms of how we can arrange for a legal transition where the government broadcast facility hopefully stays in Bohol Avenue in exchange for, after appraisal of properties of both sides, in exchange for equivalent types of compensation. For the time being, both ABS-CBN Channel 2 and People's Television 4 are operating from the Bohol Avenue complex.
Yes, Dodi and I are friendly neighbors, huh?
Very friendly, Loren.
Okay, another question here for Engineer Mercado naman kay Marcelo. Okay, from Jerry Cancio of Sampaloc. How come the media profession has no written code of ethics since it started?
Well, there is no written code of ethics as far as government is concerned, but KBP or the Kapisanan ng mga broadcasters sa Pilipinas has their own radio and television code of ethics. We in the government has recognized in the past the policy of self-regulation of media, especially broadcast media, wherein we allowed broadcasters to self-regulate or regulate themselves. And since the code of ethics that the KBP has established is acceptable to us, then we in government believe that we should have very little control over this self-regulation. We recognize the self-regulatory function of the KBP as far as their code of ethics and standards is concerned, and we had very little actually intervention as far as their standards is concerned.
I wonder if the CONCOM has touched on this problem of self-regulation.
Yes, I think when we, let me go back to that omnibus provision which says to develop communication structures, no? And also to encourage balanced information. No? This means that implies the need to really encourage multi-sectors, private enterprise to develop self-regulation, codes of ethics, to develop a good program base so that we don't have to be very dependent on external programs. I think one area of concern is this questioning this free flow of information. I think third world countries have realized after 20 years of this doctrine of free flow of information that they have the sovereign right to determine the kind of information that's good for them. And so this, what goes in terms of erosion of culture because of too much dependency on television, film programs from abroad, requires that we attend to developing our own programs.
You were cringing at your seat when Commissioner Braid was saying this.
I agree. I think we should move away from dependence on foreign canned shows, which, by the way, costs an arm and a leg. I'm not saying that only because Channel 4 right now can't afford to buy all these foreign canned shows, but I think it's a good thing to develop indigenous entertainment and information and educational material, which is the direction which we should be moving towards, I think.
Another question here from Mr. Rogelio Rivera addressed to Mr. Ross as well. This is not really part of the topic, but anyway, let's ask it. What is your reaction when some of the journalists are said to be lefties? Don't you think they are biased in the sense that they are propagating their own ideology?
No, I don't think they're biased, because if they're biased for being in the left, then the other people could just as well be biased for the right, no? Now, I just want to make something clear, because this already, being on the left, first there are varying degrees of leftists. Second, even let's say communism, to me, it's not a crime to be a communist. And nobody should be jailed for being a communist. Now, if because of the communist cause you kill, you burn, or you destroy, then that's just plain criminality and you should be arrested. But nobody should be imprisoned for his political belief. Unless he commits a crime, then he's an ordinary criminal.
Another question from Mr. Jose Santos addressed to Mr. Dodi Limcauco. Seems that People's Television 4 is just the same as Channel 4 during the Marcos regime in terms of being used as a propaganda machine by the government.
Well, I'm sorry, I disagree. It is a government broadcast facility. However, I think its use is quite different from the way Channel 4 in the Marcos years was used. I will cite you many, many instances. On Channel 4 now, you see reports of loyalist rallies, and we have in fact been charged, on certain occasions, ironically so, of giving more exposure to the loyalist rallies sometimes than we do to the Aquino government. But that just shows you, I think, that we do give balanced reporting. As I said, the editorial on our news is as often critical of the actuations of certain government officials. No? And I could cite you a good number of instances where, to prove the point that I do not get orders to air or not to air, or to slant or not to slant certain things. However, one last point is that because we are the government broadcast facility, we are expected to be the medium through which the government on certain critical occasions transmits its messages to the public, which is a different thing altogether from being a propaganda machinery which connotes lying, censorship, manipulation. Okay? We do try to perform this, like when the president has a statement, we are expected to air it. The other stations may not have the airtime to do it, but as a matter of course, the government broadcast facility should find the time to air messages from government to the general population.
Butch, here are a series of questions for Dodi Limcauco again from June Cruz. First,
June Cruz.
I don't know
June
which.
Cruz, former Philippine
I don't know
Airlines.
which June Cruz. Why did you go on a junket to the United States? Tell us why, Dodi. Did you?
No, we didn't go on a junket to the United States. We were part of a syndicated pool from all television stations, which ABS-CBN, by the way,
Why
was a part
didn't we
of.
get a thorough report of Cory's U.S. visit from Radyo ng Bayan? I guess.
Yeah, while Joe Marie Gonzalez, my colleague, directly manages Radyo ng Bayan, although he does keep me informed of what he plans. I do believe that Radyo ng Bayan gave an adequate report of the U.S.
He says, again, you should have stayed at home with all the problems of PTV4. And why is PTV4 full of basketball games when it's supposed to be public service oriented? Medyo malakas ang banat nito.
I agree. I think we have a little too much basketball, and we are presently trying to work on that problem. On the other hand, I think the PBA is also part of the Filipino culture, so we are discussing this right now to put it in its proper balance. No? I do agree with him. I think there's just too much basketball on Channel 4.
Another question from Carlos Reyna addressed to Engineer Marcelo this time, tama. How do you reconcile all this talk about freedom of the existence of the Board of Censors? How do you reconcile this freedom of the existence of the Board of Censors? Mukhang they're autonomous as far as the NTC is concerned.
Well, as far as the programs of television and radio is concerned, we are really independent of the Board of Censors. The government has not actually set up censoring of programs. We are still waiting for the pertinent provision of the Constitution that will be framed up by the Constitutional Commission.
With that, we thank Sylvia Marcelo, Anding Rosas, Commissioner Braid, and Dodi Limcauco for having joined us this evening. Thank you very much. We'll see you next week on Speed Pulse. Good night.
Good night, ladies and gentlemen.